Caitlin here from Launch the Damn Thing. I don't know if we've met before, but I've been around for the past 7 or so years, slowly crawling my way to the top. I still wouldn't say I've gotten there, but I've gotten a lot further in the last 2 years than I did in the first 5. So I wanted to hop into a time machine and go way back and show you what the older iterations of my branding looked like and why I kept changing and what it did for my business when I finally got it right. So without further ado, let's hop on in and take a look. If you scroll all the way down my Instagram feed, you'll find these old posts. These are the original old posts that I posted in, let's see, well, yeah, there we go, August 21st, 2016, 296 weeks ago. So this is when I had kind of started morphing into going by a different business name. I started with Caitlin Deacle Designs because I didn't know what else to call it, and that would have been fine. But eventually I switched over to Studio 1862. So this is kind of like at that threshold where I was just kind of moving into that direction. And you can see that here in some of these that I've reused. That's my old KD Designs logo, and I still have that domain. So this is like one of my kind of random off-branded posts from forever ago, 2016. Wow, that seems like a long time. So as you scroll through my feed, you can start to see the move towards kind of more neutral colors. I honestly couldn't tell you why I chose that palette. It was beautiful. I still think it's beautiful, but I don't have a business reason or a strategic reason why I chose what I did. So here you can kind of see the example. I'm a designer by nature, so it's attractive, I suppose, but there's no rhyme or reason for any of it, really. The Studio 1862 number came from the age of the cabin that we lived in at the time. The original portion, which is where my office was, it was built in 1862. So when I called myself Studio 1862, I was working out of the old original part of the cabin. And so that was where the number came from. But people had a hard time remembering the exact number because it didn't mean anything to them. So I may have lost some people just because they couldn't remember how to get to my website. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so just scroll up here. You can see I used that palette for a while in different combinations. And then when we hit, let's see, go further up, I started getting shiny object syndrome and changing things up a bit. Okay, and here is where I switched gears. So this is where I'm like, hey, have you noticed any changes? I redesigned and rebranded. This is actually not a font. That's my actual cursive handwriting. Still kept in the same business name, but then I moved into like a more personal, hands-on kind of feel, which I actually really liked and I kept for a long time. But let's see, that is May 2017. So a little less than a year later, I changed my whole branding. You can see my color palette here. It's kind of large. I pulled all of that from stuff like around our property and like random basic colors that I loved. So it just felt very arbitrary. And I knew it was arbitrary, but I guess I didn't really care. So let's see if we could scroll up for a ways. I did use that brand for a long time. Okay, and here's where my color palette kind of changed a bit. I started leaning more on the golds and the purples instead of the teals and whatever other colors I was using. And then let's see, this might be the first one when I changed, March 2019. So a couple years later. So I did use that other version for a long time. But in March 2019, I changed my color palette completely. And you can see that in this like bright kind of blue color. And then we have the coral and the teal and the mustard, yellow and the black. Completely different vibe here. I started using the script in this version. I don't know. I must have felt like everybody was hopping on that bandwagon and I wanted to also. and I didn't have like a handwritten script in mind. So that didn't last very long, as you can see in this kind of transitional post. So that one was in November. So from May to November of 2019, that's all that lasted before I switched and like rebranded everything from the ground up. My fonts changed, my logo changed, my color palettes, everything changed. I remember talking about that when I brought it in. I think, Meet the New Studio, whatever. Talked about, how many iterations it had gone through and why. And then Mariana is one of the Squarespace designers that I've followed for a long time. Even she said she can relate that it's really hard to brand yourself, and I completely agree. I don't know why it's so much easier to do this for other people, but when we start writing our own copy and doing our own designs, it's a whole other thing. So I'm so glad I'm not alone in that, just wanting you to hear that too. It is not easy to do this for yourself, no matter what your skill set is. So you can see here my website changed. Here I'm using the updated logo, and I did one of those 9 grids. It's a little off kilter right now, but that was my announcement of like rebranding and trying to separate the new feed from the old feed. And here you can kind of see part of my brand board. So on that note, let's go back. This is iteration number 1, which didn't really have any rhyme or reason to it. Attractive, but not, purposeful. This one was a bit more purposeful. I was going for like more of a calm vibe. I wanted some colors that were bright and some that weren't, but all very natural because that's just my personality. I don't like loud colors typically. I say that now, but look at my current branding. Then I switched to this. This is the full brand board for the color palette change. I honestly could not tell you a single reason why I chose any of those colors other than I like them. They are louder than they were before, but I think the old palette was so muted that I had trouble with call to action colors. So when you pick your color palette, make sure you're really thinking about like how this will actually come into use within your brand. And like when you put a buy button on a page, what color is that going to be? And is it going to pop off the background color? That was the biggest hurdle I was facing with that old palette. So this was a lot easier because all the colors were brighter, but it still felt like it belonged to someone else and not to me. I am not a loud personality type. You wouldn't know it from my current branding, I swear. But I am not a loud personality type. I'm an introvert. I don't typically like to draw attention to myself. And this was doing that in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. So I listened to my gut and I switched over to this. And this felt a lot better. Back towards the more natural colors, more of the like streamlined, clean studio designer vibe, which is probably my personal style. Very clean, very simple, natural gemstone earth tone colors. I had a little bit of pink for the feminine, but I mostly used the black and the gold and the teal. It was all working very well. I think I used that for a long time. So let's go back to the feed and look at actual timelines here. So I started this on November of 2019, and here is where I start the template shop for Squarespace, which if you've been following me for any length of time, that was kind of a blip. I still have it in the works, but I've got all the tutorials that I need to do over again with all of the changes that Squarespace keeps making and I can't keep up with. This is the first post where I'm talking about the template shop, and that brand was always intended to be Launch the Damn Thing, not my one-on-one service company. But the problem here that I found very quickly was that having two businesses that felt very, very different was really hard to manage. So Launch the Damn Thing had this like fun, vibrant, I could fully walk into that role and be myself. I felt comfortable in my own skin as the business owner of that branding. That's how I act in real life. Sometimes I curse, sometimes I don't. It depends on the day, how I'm feeling, I don't know. And then in my studio business, I was feeling very corporate and very professional, which I was kind of sick of. I'd been in the corporate world for about 14 years, from 2006 on to 2020 when I posted this. And I'd done this to death. It didn't feel right to me to do this for myself. I can absolutely step into someone else's shoes and do that for their business and represent them in that way, but I did not want to represent my business in that way. So on top of the fact that, having two businesses that are completely different, branding, talking to two different people, you have two Instagram accounts to manage, two Facebook accounts to manage, two email marketing accounts to manage, two websites, two domains, two of everything. And I couldn't even handle the one set. I wasn't active on all these places just for the one business, much less for the two. And then when I started doing the two, I was way more comfortable with Launch the Damn Thing than I ever was with Studio. I found that I was more active with the launch than I was with the Studio. And it was just kind of a light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, this is the direction that I need to be going in because that's where my gut is telling me to go. So from here, you can start to see the new branding come into play. This is one of my affiliate posts for Dubsado when they had a sale. That was one of the first ones that I had branded with my new fonts and everything, my new post. And the cool thing about this is November 2020. I still use this exact layout for my blog posts. And I haven't tweaked it in almost 2 years now. Like very nearly 2 years. And I haven't even thought about it in 2 years. It is what it is, and I don't deviate from it. It makes things so much simpler for me for so many reasons, but mostly because I'm not spending time looking at what other people are doing, getting shiny object syndrome and thinking like, oh, that's a beautiful font. I want to put that in my branding too. I'm not doing that anymore because it doesn't really matter. My branding now is lightheartedness, fun. It's bold on purpose, not necessarily because I'm bold. The fact that I curse in my business sometimes, I suppose, is somewhat bold. But like me, the personality type, I'm not loud. I'm not in your face. I'm very introverted in real life. I can't even fathom the fact that I'm now doing video as a kind of regular thing as opposed to like 5 years ago. I would have never dreamed of doing that. I have evolved over that time with all of the lessons that I've learned, all of the people that I learned from. And I finally got to the place where I knew who I was talking to and it wasn't corporate people. I wasn't interested in working with the high-level executive professionals, the political campaign trail people who needed, a specific like professional vibe. I can work with all of those people, but the people that I have the most fun working with are the people that are similar to myself. And so what I realized was if I behave like my actual self as the face of my business, I will attract those people to me. So they come to me because I'm different than the run-of-the-mill designer and I don't present in the same way. I'm sassy and spicy, as Elizabeth McCravey said in my podcast interview today at time of recording. And I couldn't do that with this branding. It just didn't lend itself to that. So when I switched from the Studio to Launch the Damn Thing, I started noticing that difference. To be perfectly honest, I might not have noticed it. If I hadn't started the template shop and named it Launch the Damn Thing, my intention was to help people launch through templates, not for one-to-one services. Things change and evolve, and that's okay. If I hadn't done that, I might not have figured it out as soon as I did, and I say that lightly because it did not take me a short amount of time to figure this out. So when I did figure it out, I knew, like, it was an easy decision to get rid of the old branding. It didn't matter that I had spent, 5 years on that old idea, and it didn't matter to my audience either. Like, I just showed up as a different version of myself. And the new one that I was presenting was more genuine, more relatable because I was being myself. I think people can honestly feel that in the difference. I'm not encouraging you to step outside of a box where you're not comfortable. I'm not saying do what I did. I'm not saying curse in your business if that's not you. I am saying listen to your inner voice, your gut feeling. Go with whatever that says. even if it's different than what the rest of the industry is saying, because the rest of the industry was saying niche down to an industry, niche down to photographers, or niche down to wedding professionals, or whatever. I didn't want to do that. That didn't matter to me so much as the type of personality that I wanted to work with, because I have the most fun in those situations. I absolutely adore my clients. They are wonderful human beings. I could not complain about any of them. I also haven't had any negative feedback on any of my designs in like 2 years. So when you find the home, it's a good fit all around for your clients, for the work that you produce, for the way that you show up, for the way that you're consistent in the way you show up, for everything. It's crazy. Just to prove my point, this is an old email that I sent out when I still used MailerLite. When I tell you guys that I'm only recommending softwares and tools that I actually used myself, here's proof. I actually still have a MailerLite account. It's a free plan because I don't use it now. I currently use ConvertKit, but I still have my content in my free MailerLite account. So this is an email that I had sent out the 31st of August, 2019, obviously before I did the full studio rebrand to the last version of it before I rebranded again. Then over here in Flowdesk, you can see where I merged too. When I started doing the Launch the Damn Thing, it was after all of this. I was using kind of that black and white, but this is the style of email that I was doing. So not a huge difference between the MailerLite and the Flowdesk. Then when I switched over to this one, kind of a big change. One of the main reasons why I switched to Flowdesk in the first place was because I wanted access to these higher end font choices, which now I realize don't matter. Sorry, not sorry. I am a designer. It does hurt my heart to say this out loud in a recording, but in your email marketing, that stuff doesn't matter. In fact, it may actually hurt your deliverability rates. I don't know. I'm sure there are successful people that still use Flowdesk, and I still recommend it to my clients because it's good for getting started. As you can see here, my sent tos are pretty low because that's the size of my list then. But I did do that brand for a really long time. So let's see if we can scroll to when I changed it. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so a couple of the emails that I sent, let me pull that up. This was how I notified people on my list that things were changing. Studio 1862 is becoming Launch the Damn Thing. That was like my little banner or whatever. And I started with the new branding. I still love the way that Flowdesk has the beautiful emails. I do miss that. It does make it a lot faster though to send out an email when you don't have to worry about which layout you're going to use. I'm just saying. Now that I use ConvertKit, I knock out my broadcasts so quickly. That's one of the ways that I did the transition. The rest of my Flowdesk account is all Launch the Damn Thing, as you can see here. So my email list is growing as I'm sending these out. And my Instagram is growing as I'm starting to be more active on there, show my face more often. I was really not comfortable with that in the beginning. But the more often I did it, the easier it got. It doesn't bother me a bit. And people know what I look like, know who's behind the screen, know who's the talking person on the other side of the tutorial. And that's all I really wanted for people to know. When I started doing Reels, I got even more traffic, but really what I want to focus on now that I've showed you all the iterations of my business, from old Loom videos that show my old branding, my old emails, my old Flowdesk, my old Instagram, is all basically to tell you that what happened to me will likely happen to you too. I hope you enjoyed going back into time and looking at all the mistakes that I've made in my branding over the last 7 years, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Go back, like way back, and take a look at the different iterations of my branding so you can see how like. So with that, without further ado, I'm not gonna. Okay, so this is the first. Nope, I lied. That's not even the first.